Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for spending your lunch hour with us to talk about something that I've been thinking about critically during this COVID-19 crisis, and that's the idea of grief. We're so lucky today to be joined by Mandi Zucker, a temple member from the very beginning of her birth, and an expert in grief. I'll share her bio in a few moments as well. But today, we hope to have a conversation with all of you. So we'll do a little bit of a presentation. I'm going to reflect a little bit about Judaism and grief and during this time, and just the personal thoughts that I've experienced. Then Mandi's going to share a little bit, and then we're going to be in conversation. And I look forward to really digging deep into this challenging time. And so for me, I've done a couple of funerals during the COVID-19 crisis. And for me, they have been the saddest funerals that I have done. The funerals that I've done have been older. They've lived members of our community who've lived long lives. And some of them haven't died because of COVID-19. Just of other complications with their health. But they've been hard because when we grieve, we like to have a lot of personal touch. We like to hug, we like to cry, we like to hold hands, and that has been unable to happen. We'd also like to be with people. I think for me, the thing I love about Judaism is that we do grieving really, really well. We structure our grieving process to have those hallmarks from the first day when someone dies to before that person's buried, to those 7 days of Shiva, to those periods of Shloshim, and that has been changed during this time. We can't do that together, and we've had to do it creatively, and sometimes it works, and sometimes it just doesn't work. And so as a rabbi, I've been thinking a lot about how do we support those in our community. How do we support our friends? How do we support our loved ones when death does happen? But also, it's not just that grief that I've been struggling with. It's the grief of moments in our lives that we're really excited about that we won't be able to celebrate with other people. That's graduations. That's been a mitzvah. That's a family trip that you've been longing for. And so while we talk a lot about grief and death, there has been a lot of grief and loss during this COVID-19 crisis. And so how do we think about that as well? And so luckily we have someone that can help us walk through it. And I know some of you already know Mandi Zucker, but Mandi Zucker is a seasoned social worker in the field of grief and bereavement with extensive experience at hospice, school, and nonprofit grief support. She is uniquely qualified to speak about the grief we are all experiencing, as well as how to support one another through their grief, either through the death or through others' losses, such as events, relationships, and anticipated uncertainties. Mandi is a lead responder for the Traumatic Loss Coalition of Union County and has certificates in grief recovery, as well as the study of thantology, the study of death and dying. And we are so lucky to have Mandi here with us this afternoon. She also was the past co-chair of our Tikkun Olam committee and still active in that. So I'm going to turn it over to Mandi to share some thoughts, and then we'll have some more conversation.
Thank you. Oh, I keep touching things. Sorry. I'm happy to be here today and talk with you all. I feel like this is my community, and you know, we're all grieving together, and I think it's just, you know, a nice opportunity to be with people who are going through similar things. So thank you, Rabbi Prosnit, for inviting me and letting me be part of this. So I thought we would just start with a definition of grief and go from there. So, you know, grief is just what happens. It's just the natural feelings that we experience when we go through a loss. It's normal. Sometimes people feel like it doesn't feel normal, but it is a normal reaction. I think if people weren't feeling feelings right now, that would be something more concerning. But really, all of us are experiencing grief right now. So, and we're all going through it together. And all of these feelings that we have right now are very complex and layered. Grief is always complex, but there's even more layers right now because of this crisis. So that makes our feelings more complex and layered. I think, Rabbi Prosnit said it before, that Judaism provides such a beautiful framework for rituals, for healing, and some of those things are really challenged right now. Although I do think that there are some opportunities as well, so we can certainly talk about them. Also, I would like to say, I think you all have probably used Zoom before, but there's a little chat box. So if there's things as we're talking, if you want to just type in a question or a comment, I think that would be great. We'll open it up for discussion in a bit too, but feel free to jump in with anything in the chat box. So, death is obviously an experience that leads to grief, but currently, I think it is important to talk about all of the other kinds of losses that we are all experiencing. So, I used to say things like, moving and divorce and job loss. All of those things are, create grief, and they still do. And for some people, those are very complicated things right now. But there's things that I never thought about that are creating a lot of grief for people currently. The lack of privacy, the lack of, connection to people, all of those things that, Rabbi Prosnit mentioned, the B'nai mitzvahs, the weddings, the family vacations that, are not able to happen. All of those things are creating grief. So those things are losses. That's not grief. Those are just losses. But when we experience a loss, then we feel grief. So we want to talk about how to support people who are grieving. I always think, you've all probably heard the analogy about when you get on a plane and you need to put your own mask on. I like to use that because I think it's really important to remember that you have to take care of yourself before you could take care of others. I've listed a few ways to take care of yourself, but if you have other ways, I would love to hear them. I think Rabbi Prosnit said something like, I'm an expert. I actually don't consider myself an expert. I consider myself an expert on my own grief, but certainly not on yours. So if you have things that are working for you or that you found work for other people, I would love to hear them because, we're all, clearly this is something that has never happened. We're all learning together. So anything that anybody else can share would be great. So I listed a few that I thought were important for me when I'm talking about supporting myself. One of them that I have really come to find very important is privacy. I'm an extrovert. I actually really like being with other people. I don't think of myself as someone that needs a lot of privacy, but I also found that I'm getting a little bit testy around people. And it finally, sort of clicked, like, I don't have any privacy. I don't have a commute to work. I don't have any time alone in my house. There's very little privacy. So for those of us that are living with other people, even if you like those people, sometimes you just need a little bit of a break. So I have found that I need to make sure that I'm sort of scheduling time to be alone. And that might mean that I'm taking a walk by myself, or I've noticed that when I'm cooking dinner, no one seems to be bothering me. And I try to cherish that moment, despite the fact that sometimes I wish people would help me cook dinner. When I am doing it, I sort of just, I'm very mindful of the fact that I'm alone right now. I have my own thoughts. I don't have to think about other people. Even when I'm in the shower, I try to be aware and conscious and appreciative of the fact that I'm alone. For those of you that are living alone, you might find the exact opposite. You might find that you really need to make sure that you are reaching out or asking people to check in on you. So, for each of us, it's different. But And then some of the other things that I listed are just finding hobbies, things that I can enjoy every day. Otherwise, I would just sleep all day long. So I look for things that I can enjoy. So hobbies and, picking up new hobbies. I've heard lots of people doing puzzles and, those kinds of things. So, and then, some of them are kind of obvious, but connection to others. I play Mahjong. I've been missing my Mahjong group. So we've been doing Mahjong online, and we actually FaceTime each other while we do it so we can talk and stay connected that way. And I've seen lots of things like, there's drive-by birthday parties, and we'll talk about that for funerals as well. And then fresh air. I feel like we're inside a lot. So I've been making sure that I get outside at least every day. Some of you maybe have a dog or something that you need to walk. That's been, I sometimes say that I think the dogs plan this whole thing. So if you have a dog, it's a good way to, force yourself to get outside. But you need to find some ways to make sure that, you're taking care of yourself. And those are some things that I've been doing. I'd love to hear from you about some of the things that you're doing. But once you do that, once you take good care of yourself, you may be asked to take care of others, or maybe not be asked, but you might just need to be supportive to other people if they're experiencing some kind of a loss besides the losses that we're all experiencing. If they're going through a death or, have an experience of bar mitzvah, graduation, something that they're missing, and they're, grieving over that. So some of the things that I think are really important as far as supporting other people, the first one is to avoid comparing the losses. If any of you are on Facebook, you may have seen some of these memes that talk about how, some people have had it so much worse in history, and all we're being asked to do is sit on the couch and watch Netflix and, have a little perspective. I don't actually find that to be really helpful because I haven't lived through that history. I've only lived through my life. And in my life, this is one of the most difficult things I've been asked to do. So saying that to someone sometimes minimizes, the feelings that they're having. I always say if we can get rid of 2 words in our English language, they would be at least. If we could just stop saying at least, your family member didn't die. At least, they're going to graduate from college and you'll have that graduation. At least whatever it is, because otherwise you're not validating the feelings that they're currently having. And right now, I think we need to hear that. We need to be validated and know that our feelings are real and important. So some of you may be parents, taking care of kids. And one of the things that I have found listening to my own friends is that it's important to be flexible with the discipline and the rules. I talked about privacy before. Kids have very little privacy at home. One of the ways that they connect with their friends is outside of their home, right? So they go to school, they walk to school together, they'll go to friends' houses, they'll use their phones and technology. I talked to someone who was telling me that, they have a rule in their house that their kids are not allowed to have technology in their bedrooms. But really, that's their only private space. So if we take the technology away from them in their bedrooms, they really don't have anywhere that they can talk to their friends about, their horrible parents or school or, the boy that they like. So, it's just probably a good idea to reassess what the rules in your house are. And I'm not saying that kids should be sleeping with their phones. I'm not, but just to reassess whether or not that's an important rule right now. I have actually told my own children that, it's lovely that we get to have dinner together every night, but it's a lot of dinners together every night. And if they want to take dinner occasionally and go into their rooms, they can do that. So that's just something that I did in my own family. They've actually only taken me up on it so far, each one of them once. So, that's been nice, but we all kind of need our own space. I have one and he's supposed to be in college. And, he might have just taken dinner back to his dorm room and studied. So forcing him to sit down to our dinner table at a certain time when I've made dinner might be challenging for him. So giving them a little bit of flexibility and power, because they really don't have a lot of power right now. So all of us really have very little power, but giving them some opportunities to feel like they have control. I also think just asking people, what do you need right now? Frequently we think we know what people need, but really, like I said, I'm an expert in my own grief. I'm not an expert in yours. So what I might need might be very different than what you need. So just saying that, I wish I knew how to help you. Can you tell me what I can do to be supportive? Is really, I think, often feels really good to people. And then one other thing, I mean, you can read the rest of these here, but one of the other things I think is important is just to know your own limits. So some of us are, in a good place right now. Some of us are not. So, and that can change throughout the course of the day. So if you're in a good place and someone calls you and says, I need to talk, great. If you're not in a good place and you can't be there, or you've got, things happening in your house and you're not really able to be present, know that. And it's okay to tell that to your family and to your friends, to say, listen, I need a half an hour. I'm going to go do some yoga outside, take good care of myself, and then I'm going to come back to you and I'll be present to you then. That is much more supportive than trying to be present to somebody when you're not actually able to be. So make sure you're taking good care of yourself throughout the day. And then you're in a better place to take care of others. I don't know if any of you have heard this. I'm trying to remember the exact cliche, but it's something like, does you no good to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. So, burning yourself out just to make sure you're taking care of other people doesn't really help. So, and then, I was really thinking about, did I do that? About funerals and about deaths here, especially in the Jewish community. And I do think we do such a great job of taking care of people. And it's really hard right now. So I listed a few things that I've heard about and seen for people who are dealing with deaths. And obviously, if you have something else, I'd love to hear that too. But one of the things that I thought about was that, despite so much that we are missing with the funerals and the connection in person, there are some opportunities that this pandemic provides because we have time. So sometimes when somebody dies and it's sudden, we don't have a lot of time to plan a funeral, to make it personal, to, really make it feel meaningful. And right now we have that time. So we can plan for their yard site and, get people involved and do things like, really find all the pictures that you want and ask people to share stories and write them down. Paint rocks, get the kids involved, creating memorials and those kinds of things. So, none of us would have asked for this. I would prefer that we never have to deal with this again, but there are some things that we can be doing to make sure that, that this opportunity that we have by being in isolation does provide us with opportunities to create more meaning for funerals and things. So the other thing I would just say is that, we don't know everything, any of us. So as people feel like they need support, if you can listen to them, great. If you're a good listener without trying to, fix it or offer them too much advice, great. And if not, you can learn about some resources. You can Google grief and COVID-19. And there's a lot of resources out there available. So you can help people find other resources online. There's tons of support groups online. There's, people are doing teletherapy. There's lots of things that you can do. So you don't have to be the one to, to support people if you're not in the place to do it. So I always say that inaction creates more isolation. So some people might tell you, leave me alone. I don't want you to call or talk about it. Okay, so then we can respect that. But generally speaking, I would rather err on the side of reaching out. Not doing anything makes people feel more isolated. So just calling to say, I was thinking about you. I can't imagine what this is like for you, is probably better than doing nothing and saying, I wasn't sure if you needed space. So that would be my suggestions as far as ways to support people. But like I said, I would love to hear from each of you what your ideas are. Looks like, do we have somebody waiting in the, oh no, that's a chat. Okay. Okay. End of slideshow. How do I, oh, I just click to exit. Okay. Did I stop sharing my screen? There we go. Okay.
So thank you, Mandi, for just giving us an overview of how we can continue our conversation. So for me, right, show of hands, who's participated in a virtual Shiva yet? Has anyone? So a couple. Has anyone participated in a virtual funeral?
No.
No. And so our mourning has changed, and I think what Mandi has said, there are some definitely challenges for this moment, but it also has provided us with some opportunities as well. And so, well, I want to get to the mourning of death in a second, but just for us as a synagogue, I've been thinking about how we are marking people's moments in for B'nai Mitzvah, for our confirmands, for our preschool families who won't be able to have that moving up ceremony. And we're trying to do something. I think that's what we have discussed. And we also acknowledge that it's not the same. Mm-hmm. And this is not what we had anticipated. This virtual B'nai Mitzvah is not what you wanted. And this is really challenging. This is really hard. Our confirmation that's going to be online in May is not what we had hoped for. But let's mark this moment because it's still really special. Let's mark your grandchild's graduation. I was supposed to officiate a wedding this weekend for a Temple family member. I gave them a call just to say, you know what, I'm thinking of you. This was supposed to be the kickoff of your wedding, of your daughter's wedding weekend, and it's not going to be happening. I'm looking forward to the next year to be able to celebrate with you, but I know that this is a hard day for you as well. I think acknowledging it, but also seeing how can we be creative in some of the rituals that we will be doing. I know our preschool is thinking about how are they going to do that moving up ceremony, and I just saw Jill sign on. We are also thinking about the end of year religious school, right? Saying goodbye to Abra and Canna Rubel. Like, how do we mark those moments as well when we are experience a loss? I think it's really important for us to mark them and do something, and then try to pivot as much as we can to make it a celebration.
I talked to someone who was supposed to get married, and she said one of the best things that happened on the day that they were supposed to get married is that she got a card from someone who talked about, like, this is what we were supposed to be doing today. I was looking forward to, I know you worked so hard on the cake, and, you know, I couldn't wait to see that dress. And, you know, and then talked a little bit about, you know, the relationship that she and her fiance have and how special it is for, you know, people to be able to see that. So I think you're right, marking it with, shared experiences and memories of, and dreams, you know, and the hopes and dreams that we still have for people. So.
And so I think that's if we can think about how we do that for our community and how we can be a part of that. As for grief, what I've seen, so there are two ways that rabbis and canons are officiating at funerals. We are there present with a very limited number of people. So the funerals that I have officiated at have been 3 people and maybe the funeral home director. I've officiated a funeral where someone stayed in the car and we did a whole thing and I spoke really loudly, as well as funerals have been on Zoom and the rabbi hasn't even been there. I haven't done that type of funeral yet, but having people Zoom in, sending a link to people to be a part of that community, and having people still share as much as they can. I think with Zoom, right, we can put on photos of when someone's talking or giving a eulogy of this as a young man or a young woman, with their grandchildren, and like we can use we don't always use visual technology at our funerals, but there's a way to like show those pictures or share memories in that way. And then Shiva minions have been really a powerful experience to see so many people online. The hard part is you don't hear everyone singing, and you don't have the opportunity as much to share on the sit down with that individual. But I think has brought people together and feel sometimes going to a Shiva minion is really uncomfortable. Like, oh, should I be going? Like, I don't really know this family. I think what I've seen on Zoom is like people just show up a little bit more than they would have and don't think about it as much. It takes the awkwardness a little bit down, which I see as a plus, but also maybe a reminder to us that when it gets back to the new normal, or should we consider going to more of these Shiva minion